The weight of Jake's old laptop in my hands felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the burden of every unanswered question. As I sat down to open it, a mix of anticipation and dread coursed through me. What if this was the key to finding him? What if it wasn't? The screen flickered to life, and I was greeted by a password prompt, a seemingly innocuous barrier that felt like a wall keeping me from the truth. I started with the obvious guesses: his birthday, his dog's name, the inside jokes we'd shared over the years. Each failed attempt made the knot in my stomach tighten. Days turned into weeks as I worked tirelessly to crack it. It wasn't just a password anymore. It was a symbol of my desperation to hold on to hope. I scoured YouTube tutorials, forums, and obscure guides until finally, with a combination of persistence and sheer luck, I broke through. The desktop was almost empty. No cluttered icons, no personal photos, just a few unassuming folders and a text document. My heart sank at first. Was this all there was? But as I clicked through the folders, I stumbled upon something buried deep within the file structure, a folder labeled Haven. The name alone sent a chill down my spine, a strange juxtaposition of safety and foreboding. Inside were dozens of links, each a cryptic string of random characters ending in .onion. It hit me like a ton of bricks. These were links to the dark web. I'd heard enough about it to know this wasn't a place you stumbled into lightly. My mind raced with questions. Why did Jake have these? What had he gotten himself into? The thought of diving into such a dangerous realm terrified me, but the alternative, doing nothing, was worse. Jake had vanished without a trace, and if this laptop held even a fragment of a clue, I had to follow it. Downloading the necessary tools felt like crossing a threshold into the unknown. As the Tor browser installed, I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands trembling on the keyboard. I hesitated before clicking the first link, my cursor hovering over it as if touching it would burn me. But the image of Jake's face, his crooked smile and scar above his eyebrow, pushed me forward. The screen loaded slowly, revealing a forum unlike anything I'd ever seen. Conversations and threads spiraled into a chaotic underworld where morality seemed non-existent. Each click felt like descending deeper into a pit I might never climb out of. But then I found it, a section dedicated to missing persons. My stomach churned as I scrolled through photo after photo, each one accompanied by chilling captions that reduced people to commodities. And then I saw him. Jake's photo was there, staring back at me through the screen. The image was grainy, his face slightly obscured, but I'd know him anywhere. The caption made me want to vomit. Male, 25, intelligent, strong build. Starting bid, 30 BTC. My vision blurred, and I had to steady myself to keep from collapsing. Jake, my best friend, my brother in everything but blood, was being auctioned off like property. I wanted to scream, to smash the laptop, to do anything but sit there frozen in horror. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the police, frantically explaining what I'd found. Their skepticism hit me like a slap in the face. The dark web is full of hoaxes, one officer said, their tone dismissive. They promised to look into it, but I knew they wouldn't. Nobody believed me, not the cops, not Jake's family. I was on my own. The realization hit hard. If I wanted to save Jake, I'd have to navigate this dark, twisted world myself. I didn't know where to start, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. The weight of Jake's old laptop in my hands felt heavier than it should have, like it carried the burden of every unanswered question. As I sat down to open it, a mix of anticipation and dread coursed through me. What if this was the key to finding him? What if it wasn't? The screen flickered to life, and I was greeted by a password prompt, a seemingly innocuous barrier that felt like a wall keeping me from the truth. I started with the obvious guesses: his birthday, his dog's name, the inside jokes we'd shared over the years. Each failed attempt made the knot in my stomach tighten. Days turned into weeks as I worked tirelessly to crack it. It wasn't just a password anymore. It was a symbol of my desperation to hold on to hope. I scoured YouTube tutorials, forums, and obscure guides until finally, with a combination of persistence and sheer luck, I broke through. The desktop was almost empty. No cluttered icons, no personal photos, just a few unassuming folders and a text document. My heart sank at first. Was this all there was? But as I clicked through the folders, I stumbled upon something buried deep within the file structure, a folder labeled Haven. The name alone sent a chill down my spine, a strange juxtaposition of safety and foreboding. Inside were dozens of links, each a cryptic string of random characters ending in .onion. It hit me like a ton of bricks. These were links to the dark web. I'd heard enough about it to know this wasn't a place you stumbled into lightly. My mind raced with questions. Why did Jake have these? What had he gotten himself into? The thought of diving into such a dangerous realm terrified me, but the alternative, doing nothing, was worse. Jake had vanished without a trace, and if this laptop held even a fragment of a clue, I had to follow it. Downloading the necessary tools felt like crossing a threshold into the unknown. As the Tor browser installed, I could feel my pulse quicken, my hands trembling on the keyboard. I hesitated before clicking the first link, my cursor hovering over it as if touching it would burn me. But the image of Jake's face, his crooked smile and scar above his eyebrow, pushed me forward. The screen loaded slowly, revealing a forum unlike anything I'd ever seen. Conversations and threads spiraled into a chaotic underworld where morality seemed non-existent. Each click felt like descending deeper into a pit I might never climb out of. But then I found it, a section dedicated to missing persons. My stomach churned as I scrolled through photo after photo, each one accompanied by chilling captions that reduced people to commodities. And then I saw him. Jake's photo was there, staring back at me through the screen. The image was grainy, his face slightly obscured, but I'd know him anywhere. The caption made me want to vomit. Male, 25, intelligent, strong build. Starting bid, 30 BTC. My vision blurred, and I had to steady myself to keep from collapsing. Jake, my best friend, my brother in everything but blood, was being auctioned off like property. I wanted to scream, to smash the laptop, to do anything but sit there frozen in horror. Instead, I picked up my phone and called the police, frantically explaining what I'd found. Their skepticism hit me like a slap in the face. The dark web is full of hoaxes, one officer said, their tone dismissive. They promised to look into it, but I knew they wouldn't. Nobody believed me, not the cops, not Jake's family. I was on my own. The realization hit hard. If I wanted to save Jake, I'd have to navigate this dark, twisted world myself. I didn't know where to start, but I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't give up. Not now. Not ever. The night I stumbled onto Jake's profile on the dark web, sleep became a distant memory. His face, frozen in that haunting photo, was etched into my mind. Every detail of the caption played on repeat. Male, 25, intelligent, strong build. Starting bid, 30 BTC. It wasn't just a description, it was a death sentence. The countdown timer on the auction added a new layer of dread. 4 days. That was all the time I had to figure out where he was and how to stop this. Desperation can make you bold, reckless even. I dove headfirst into researching the dark web, learning how to navigate its shadowy corridors without leaving myself exposed. Every guide I read came with dire warnings: the risks of being tracked, the predators lurking, the danger of asking the wrong questions. But none of it mattered. If this was where Jake was trapped, I had to find him. In my search, I came across a name that sent ripples through every forum I visited: Voidwalker. They were a notorious figure in this underworld, known for finding information others couldn't. For a price. Reaching out to them felt like playing with fire, but I had no choice. My message was simple, raw. My best friend is being auctioned off. I need your help. Days passed with no reply. Every minute felt like an eternity. I kept checking the auction site, watching as the bids climbed higher and higher. The sheer callousness of it all was unbearable. Jake wasn't a person to these people. He was a transaction, a number on a screen. Finally, late one night, a response appeared in my inbox. "What are you offering?" I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I wasn't rich, didn't have any connections that could be leveraged. All I had was a willingness to do whatever it took. I replied, offering every penny I could scrape together. Boyd Walker didn't seem impressed. Their next message was curt. Bitcoin. $2,000. No charity. It was an impossible amount for me, but I didn't hesitate. I drained my savings, sold what little I could, and converted it into Bitcoin. When the payment finally cleared, Boyd Walker delivered what I'd hoped for: access to Haven, the exclusive forum where Jake's auction was hosted. Logging into Haven was like stepping into a nightmare. The interface was sleek, professional, disturbingly efficient. It didn't look like the chaotic cesspool I'd imagined the dark web to be. It was too polished, too normal, like a sinister version of Craigslist. The section for missing persons was prominently displayed, complete with filters for age, gender, and even condition. Scrolling through the listings felt like wading through pure evil. Every photo, every caption, was a testament to the depravity of the human soul. But I couldn't let myself get overwhelmed. I had to focus. Jake's profile was still there, the countdown timer ticking relentlessly. Less than 48 hours remained before the auction went live. There was a chat room linked to the site, a place where buyers and sellers exchanged information. I hesitated before entering. The messages that filled the screen were a chilling window into the minds of these monsters. Lot 46 looks promising. Any updates on prior handling? Transport tomorrow night. Discretion is key. Got any under 20? Willing to pay extra? My hands shook as I typed into the chat, breaking through the vile conversations. Who is Lot 46? Where is he being kept? The response was immediate and mocking. Another wannabe hero. Good luck, Boy Scout. Pro tip: they never last long. Then, a private message appeared from a user named AuctionAdmin. Stick your nose in where it doesn't belong, and you'll be next. The message sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, I considered walking away, shutting everything down, and pretending none of this had happened. But I couldn't. Jake's life was on the line, and if I gave up now, I'd lose him forever. I had to keep going, no matter the cost. The day after I received the chilling threat from AuctionAdmin, my resolve was tested like never before. My phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. The message was short, but it hit me like a punch to the gut. Last warning? Stop now. Attached was a photo of my apartment building, taken from just outside. They knew where I lived. They were watching me. For a fleeting moment, fear nearly paralyzed me. My instinct was to run, to vanish into the shadows and leave this nightmare behind. But then I thought of Jake, trapped, terrified, with time running out. If I gave in to fear, he would be lost forever. I had no choice but to push forward, no matter the risks. Logging back onto Haven, I entered the chat room, determined to find answers. Amid the grotesque conversations, a private message popped up from a user named Lot 46 Watcher. The message was direct. Looking for Lot 46? My hands trembled as I typed back. Yes. Do you know where he is? The reply came after an agonizing pause. Maybe. But info like that doesn't come free. How much? I asked, bracing myself. $2,000. Bitcoin. No haggling. I didn't have the money. My savings were already drained, and I had nothing left to sell. But desperation makes you resourceful. I borrowed what I could, dipped into credit I didn't have, and converted it all into Bitcoin. Within hours, I sent the payment, every fiber of my being hoping I wasn't being scammed. True to their word, Lot 46 Watcher sent me coordinates. A warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The message ended with a warning. You didn't hear this from me. Be careful. That night, I parked a block away from the warehouse and approached on foot, every shadow and sound amplifying my anxiety. The building loomed in the darkness, its windows boarded up and walls covered in graffiti. It looked abandoned, but the faint hum of activity inside told a different story. I found a side door slightly ajar and slipped inside, my heart pounding. The interior was worse than I'd imagined. Rows of cages lined the walls, each one filled with people, terrified, broken, and utterly silent. Their muffled cries were a symphony of despair, echoing off the cold, metallic walls. My stomach churned as I scanned each cage, hoping against hope to find Jake. But he wasn't there. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence behind me. "Looking for someone?" I spun around to see a man, his face obscured by a balaclava, a gun in his hand. His tone was mocking, almost amused. "Lot 46, right?" he sneered. "You're too late." Adrenaline surged through me. Before I could think, I swung my flashlight at his head. The blow landed, sending him stumbling backward. He fired a shot, the sound deafening in the confined space. The bullet ricocheted off the metal cages, and chaos erupted. The captives screamed, their voices piercing the darkness. I didn't wait to see if the man recovered. I bolted through the nearest door, my only thought being escape. Behind me, I heard shouting and the screech of tires. A van roared to life, its headlights cutting through the night as it sped after me. I ducked into an alley, pressing myself against the wall as the van slowed, its headlights sweeping the area. My breath was shallow, my heart pounding like a drum. After what felt like an eternity, the van drove off. I stumbled back to my car and drove home, my hands gripping the wheels so tightly my knuckles turned white. Jake was gone. Whether he'd been moved, sold, or killed I didn't know. But I had failed. And the weight of that failure was crushing. The next morning, I reported everything to the authorities. The warehouse, the cages, the shot that was fired. But when they investigated, the place was empty. No captives, no cages, no signs of life. The auction site had vanished overnight, leaving no trace. It was as if it had never existed. The guilt was unbearable. I couldn't shake the image of Jake's photo on that screen, his hollow eyes staring back at me. I had tried, but it hadn't been enough. And now, I had to live with the knowledge that I had failed my best friend when he needed me the most. The days that followed were a blur of paranoia and self-recrimination. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't think of anything but the events at the warehouse and the chilling note I'd found under my door. "We haven't forgotten you." Every creak of my apartment's floorboards, every knock on the door sent my heart racing. I was a prisoner of my own fear, trapped in a cage of my mind's making. Jake's face haunted me, not the Jake I knew from school days, the one who laughed at his own bad jokes and always had my back, but the Jake from the auction site. Hollow-eyed, bruised, and lifeless. The thought that I might never see him again was unbearable. But what truly ate away at me was the gnawing doubt. What if my interference had made things worse? What if I'd condemned him to a fate even more horrific? I tried to carry on with my life, but it was impossible. Everywhere I went, I felt eyes on me. At the grocery store, a man lingered too long in the same aisle, his gaze unnerving. At work, a black car sat parked across the street for hours, its windows tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. Even at home, the silence was deafening, each sound amplified by my anxiety. I began to question everything and everyone. One night, the paranoia reached its peak. As I walked home from work, I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't hurried, but they matched my pace, each step a mirror of my own. I turned around, my heart hammering in my chest, but the street was empty. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, but the footsteps persisted. Finally, I broke into a run, sprinting the last block to my apartment. Once inside, I locked and bolted the door, pressing my ear against it to listen. Nothing. I barely slept that night, my mind replaying every detail of the past weeks. The dark web auction, the cages, the gunshot, it all felt like a bad dream. But the note under my door was real. The man with the gun was real. And Jake's disappearance was very, very real. The next morning, I found another note slipped under my door. This one was more chilling than the first. 4 simple words scrawled in red ink. "You can't hide forever." My hands shook as I read it, my mind racing with possibilities. Who were they? The buyers? The sellers? The faceless administrators of Haven? And what did they want from me? I knew then that staying in my apartment was no longer an option. They knew where I lived, and every moment I spent there put me in greater danger. I had to leave, to disappear, to sever every tie to my old life. It was the only way to survive. Packing my belongings was harder than I'd anticipated. Every photo, every memento, every familiar item felt like a chain tethering me to a past I couldn't escape. I stuffed what I could into a single suitcase and left everything else behind. There was no time for goodbyes, no forwarding address. I deleted my social media accounts, changed my phone number, and cashed out my bank accounts. By the time the sun rose, I was on the road, leaving the city, and my old life, behind. I drove for hours, stopping only when exhaustion forced me to. I ended up in a small town several states away, a place so quiet and remote it felt like another world. It was the kind of town where everyone knew everyone, where the only noise at night was the rustle of wind through the trees. It should have been comforting, but for me, it was suffocating. Every shadow was a potential threat, every stranger a potential enemy. I found a job working night shifts at a gas station. The work was mindless, but that was what I needed, something to distract me, to keep my hands busy. The pay was lousy, but money wasn't my priority anymore. Survival was. But even in this quiet town, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. The paranoia clung to me like a second skin, making every moment a battle to stay calm. I told myself I was safe, that I'd escaped. But deep down, I knew the truth: you don't escape the dark web. Not really. Not ever. I thought moving to a small, quiet town would bring me peace, but instead, it became a different kind of prison. The world I left behind, Haven, the auction site, Jake's haunting face, was gone, but the scars it left behind weren't. My nights were filled with shadows that felt too close, and my days were spent looking over my shoulder, searching for threats that might not even exist. At first, I tried to convince myself that the paranoia would fade. I started working night shifts at a gas station, a place where the silence was broken only by the occasional customer or the hum of flickering fluorescent lights. The monotony was supposed to keep me grounded, but instead, it gave my mind too much space to wander. Every car that pulled into the lot made me stiffen. Every unfamiliar face sent a chill down my spine. One night, as I was stocking shelves, the bell above the gas station door jingled. I glanced up to see a man in a dark hoodie. His face was obscured, his movements slow and deliberate. My pulse quickened. He didn't buy anything, didn't say a word, just wandered the aisles before leaving. I tried to shake it off, but when I saw the same man leaning against a car in the far corner of the lot an hour later, my stomach sank. I debated calling the police, but what would I say? A man bought nothing at a gas station? It sounded ridiculous. But the unease stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. It was just one of many strange encounters. Another time, I found a black sedan parked across the street from my apartment for hours. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside, but I could feel eyes on me every time I passed. Once, I tried walking up to it, hoping to spook whoever was inside, but the car drove off before I could get close. I told myself it was nothing, just a coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. The worst was when I started hearing noises at night. Footsteps outside my window, whispers that seemed to seep through the walls. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard a faint tapping on my apartment door. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The tapping grew louder, more insistent. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept toward the door, my hands shaking. Through the peephole, I saw nothing but darkness. After what felt like an eternity, the tapping stopped. I stood there, paralyzed, unsure of what to do. The next morning, I found a single piece of paper slipped under my door. "Still watching," it read in jagged handwriting. My stomach turned, and I felt the walls of my small apartment closing in on me. It didn't matter how far I ran or how well I tried to hide. They had found me. Whether it was the buyers, the sellers, or the shadowy figures behind the auction, I couldn't escape them. Every knock, every shadow, every stranger became a threat. My life had become a game of cat and mouse, and I was the prey. I thought about leaving again, starting fresh in another town, but where would it end? How many times could I run before there was nowhere left to go? The thought of staying put, of facing whatever was coming, filled me with dread. But so did the idea of leaving and dragging this nightmare with me wherever I went. I was trapped, caught between the ghosts of my past and the monsters of my present. And no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was only a matter of time before they caught up to me. Every attempt to rebuild a sense of normalcy felt like trying to patch a sinking ship. I had changed my name, moved to a remote town, and avoided any semblance of my old life, but the shadows always seemed to follow. Paranoia was no longer a fleeting sensation, it was a constant companion, whispering doubts and warnings with every step I took. One night, after yet another long shift at the gas station, I decided to walk home instead of driving. The town was eerily quiet, the streets illuminated only by dim streetlights. As I walked, I felt it, a presence, faint but undeniable. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just the wind rustling the trees, or perhaps an overactive imagination born from exhaustion. But then, the sound of footsteps echoed faintly behind me. They weren't hurried, nor did they falter, they matched my own pace exactly. I quickened my stride, my heart pounding, but the footsteps continued. When I reached the corner of the block, I couldn't resist the urge any longer. I turned around, scanning the street behind me. It was empty. No cars, no people, nothing but the faint hum of a distant street lamp. I tried to laugh it off, convincing myself that I was being irrational. But as I resumed walking, the sound returned, closer this time. I didn't turn around again. Instead, I broke into a sprint, my breath coming in sharp bursts as I reached my apartment building. Fumbling with my keys, I shoved the door open and slammed it shut behind me, bolting the lock. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. Nothing. Just the silence of the night. I leaned against the door, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed in my pocket, nearly making me jump out of my skin. When I pulled it out, the screen displayed an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. A distorted voice crackled through the line, cold and mocking. "Running won't help, you know. We always find you." The call ended before I could respond, leaving me gripping the phone with trembling hands. Panic coursed through me. They weren't just watching, they were toying with me, making it clear that no matter how far I ran or how well I hid, I was still within their reach. The note under my door, the car parked across the street, the footsteps, it wasn't paranoia. It was real. I spent the rest of the night barricading my apartment, moving furniture in front of the door and checking every window lock twice. Sleep was out of the question. Every sound, no matter how small, made me jump. The distant creak of the old building felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Morning brought no relief. Exhausted and jittery, I called my boss and quit my job on the spot. I couldn't stay in this town any longer. If they had found me here, they'd find me anywhere. The only choice left was to vanish completely, no forwarding address, no phone, no trace. But even as I packed my belongings once again, a dark realization settled over me. They weren't just trying to scare me. They were waiting for the right moment to act. And when that moment came, there would be no escaping them. Living in constant fear changes you. It twists your sense of reality, making every shadow seem sinister and every sound a warning. My new life in this quiet town, far from the chaos of my past, should have been a fresh start. But the longer I stayed, the more it felt like I was trapped in an invisible prison, one where the bars were made of paranoia, and the guards were the unseen forces lurking just out of sight. It was subtle at first. A flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, the sensation of being watched, the occasional unknown number calling my phone. I told myself it was all in my head, a byproduct of the horrors I'd uncovered. But one night, everything changed. I was sitting in my apartment, scrolling through news articles, when the power cut out. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the wind outside. My heart skipped a beat, but I tried to stay calm. Power outages happened, especially in a small town like this. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, illuminating the dim room with a shaky beam of light. As I moved to check the breaker box, a faint knock echoed from the front door. My stomach dropped. It wasn't the casual knock of a neighbor needing something. It was slow, deliberate, and spaced out, as if whoever was on the other side wanted me to feel every second of their presence. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. Another knock followed, louder this time. My hands trembled as I crept toward the peephole, but when I looked, there was nothing. Just the empty hallway bathed in the dim glow of an emergency light. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Then my phone buzzed, startling me so much I almost dropped it. A text message from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." My pulse thundered in my ears as I stared at the words, my fear mounting. Suddenly, the power flickered back on, and the apartment was filled with an oppressive silence. I checked the locks on every window and door, reinforcing them with whatever I could find. But no matter how secure my surroundings felt, I couldn't shake the overwhelming dread that seeped into every corner of my mind. The next day, I tried to convince myself it had been a random incident, a cruel prank, a mistake, anything but what I feared. But deep down, I knew the truth. The people behind Haven hadn't forgotten me. They were letting me know that no matter how far I ran, they were always one step ahead. The sense of isolation was unbearable. I couldn't trust anyone. Every stranger on the street became a potential threat. Every glance in my direction felt loaded with malice. I started avoiding public places altogether, only venturing out late at night when the town was asleep. But even then, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't just fear anymore, it was inevitability. The dark web had a reach far greater than I'd ever imagined, and I was caught in its grip. Every decision I made felt like walking a tightrope over a chasm, with no guarantee of safety on the other side. And the worst part? I knew this was only the beginning. They weren't done with me. Not yet. When you live with the kind of fear I did, every moment becomes a calculated risk. Even the smallest decisions, where to shop, when to leave the house, whether to answer a phone call, carry the weight of survival. But no amount of careful planning could prepare me for what happened next. It started with a letter. I found it tucked under my apartment door one morning, a plain white envelope with no name or address. My hand shook as I opened it, fearing what might be inside. The note was typed, short and simple. "You're not as invisible as you think." I froze, my breath caught in my chest. My first instinct was to pack up and run again, but something stopped me. They'd found me twice already. Running wouldn't solve anything, it would only delay the inevitable. I needed to confront this head on, but how do you fight against shadows? Over the next few days, I became hyper-aware of everything around me. Every creak in the floorboards, every rustle of leaves outside, every stranger who lingered a second too long, it all felt like a threat. At night, I barely slept, jolted awake by the slightest noise. Then came the footsteps. It was a little past midnight when I heard them, soft and deliberate, pacing back and forth in the hallway outside my apartment. I turned off all the lights and pressed my ear to the door, my heart hammering in my chest. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a faint tapping sound. Someone was dragging their fingers along my door. I grabbed the knife I kept hidden in my kitchen drawer and stood frozen in the dark, every muscle in my body tense. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. I waited, straining to hear any sign of movement, but the silence was suffocating. The next morning, I found another note, this one taped to my door. "We're closer than you think." Panic set in. I spent the entire day scouring my apartment, looking for anything out of place. A hidden camera, a planted device, something that would explain how they were tracking me. I found nothing, but the sense of being watched only grew stronger. It wasn't just paranoia anymore. They wanted me to know they were watching, to feel the constant pressure of their presence. It was psychological warfare, and it was working. Every time I left the apartment, I checked over my shoulder, scanning the faces of everyone I passed. Was it the man at the coffee shop? The woman at the grocery store? It could have been anyone. One night, I decided to test them. I packed a small bag, left my apartment, and took a bus to a nearby city, deliberately avoiding any predictable routes. I spent hours wandering through crowded streets and empty alleyways, hoping to shake off anyone who might be following me. When I finally returned home, exhausted and on edge, I found the note that shattered what little resolve I had left. It was on my kitchen table. Nice try. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. They'd been inside my apartment. My supposed safe haven had been violated, and there was no escaping them. They were always a step ahead, always watching, and now I was out of options. The walls felt like they were closing in, the weight of their presence pressing down on me. No matter what I did, they were there, reminding me that my life was no longer my own. And as I sat in the dim light of my apartment, clutching the note with trembling hands, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. This wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about control. And they had all of it. Living under constant surveillance is not just a life, it's a slow descent into madness. The smallest details become traps for your mind. A misplaced object feels like a clue, a shadow in the corner of your eye feels like confirmation. Every second is a question. Are they here? Are they watching? One night, I came home to find my apartment eerily silent. It wasn't the usual quiet I'd grown used to. It was the kind of silence that presses against your skin, that tells you something is wrong. My first instinct was to leave, to turn around and run as far as I could, but I forced myself to step inside. The air was thick with tension, and every nerve in my body screamed at me to stop. But I couldn't. I needed to know. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. My furniture was exactly where I left it, my books neatly stacked, my laptop untouched. But then I noticed the smell, faint, metallic, like rusted iron. It wasn't there when I left. My stomach churned as I moved cautiously through the apartment, every step echoing in the oppressive quiet. In the kitchen, the smell was stronger. My eyes darted to the counter, where a single item had been placed, a knife from my drawer, gleaming under the fluorescent light. Next to it was a photo. My blood ran cold as I picked it up. It was a picture of me, taken from the corner of my living room. I was sitting on the couch, staring at my laptop. The timestamp on the corner showed it was taken just hours earlier. They had been inside. They had been here. The realization hit like a freight train. They weren't just watching, they were toying with me, letting me know how easily they could breach my sanctuary. My legs felt weak, and I clutched the counter for support. I wanted to scream, to lash out, but the walls felt like they were closing in, swallowing me whole. I spent the rest of the night barricaded in my bedroom, knife in hand, every muscle tense and ready to spring at the first sound. But nothing came. No footsteps, no whispers, no knocks at the door. Just silence, dragging on endlessly, amplifying every thought, every fear. The next day, I decided I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed what little I could carry and left, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. What was the point? They had all the keys, figuratively and literally. I checked into a motel far from the city, hoping the distance would give me some semblance of peace. But the paranoia followed me. Every creak of the old motel floorboards, every hum of passing cars, every knock on a neighbor's door made my heart race. I barely slept, and when I did, the nightmares were worse. One morning, I woke up to a notification on my phone, a text message from an unknown number. "Did you think you could hide?" Attached was a photo of the motel, taken from the parking lot. I dropped my phone, the sound echoing in the tiny room. They knew where I was. They always knew. And in that moment, I realized there was no running from them. No amount of distance or caution could keep me safe. They would always be one step ahead, watching, waiting, and letting me know, in their own twisted way, that they owned me. The fear had become something else now. It wasn't just about survival. It was about control, and they had it all. I was no longer living. I was existing, a puppet dangling on their strings, with no escape in sight. The realization that there was no escape settled over me like a shroud. Every plan I had made, Every precaution I had taken had been for nothing. They were always one step ahead, their presence an unshakable shadow. The note, the message, the carefully placed signs, they weren't just reminders of their reach. They were a warning, a promise of what was to come. I stopped pretending to live a normal life. There was no point. My days were consumed by paranoia, my nights haunted by restless nightmares. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, and every noise, every flicker of movement outside my window sent my heart racing. I was a prisoner in my own mind, trapped by the fear that any moment could be my last. But then, one night, something shifted. It wasn't courage. No, I'd long since abandoned the idea that I could fight back. It was resignation. A cold, numb acceptance that if they were going to come for me, they wouldn't have to drag me down kicking and screaming. I was already broken. I sat at my small, dimly lit table, the laptop before me like an old adversary. I hadn't touched it since that last message, but tonight felt different. If they wanted me to stop looking, then maybe that was the key. Maybe I could find something, some truth, some weakness, that they hadn't anticipated. Logging in felt like stepping into a void. The dark web was as unsettling as ever, a place where humanity's worst impulses were laid bare. I combed through forums, digging deeper than I ever had before, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and determination. Hours passed, but nothing gave me the answers I sought. Then, just as I was about to give up, I found it, a thread buried in a labyrinth of links. The title was vague, but the content was unmistakable. A user claiming to know the truth about the auction sites, about the people behind them. I clicked, my breath catching in my throat. The thread was a mix of speculation and cold, hard facts. Names, locations, methods, all laid out with chilling precision. The user claimed to have infiltrated one of the operations, gathering evidence to expose them. But at the end of the post, a single line froze me in place. They don't just take their victims. They take the ones who search for them. The screen blurred as tears welled in my eyes. I had been a fool to think I could outsmart them, a fool to believe I could find Jake or uncover the truth without paying the price. They had been watching all along, letting me dig my own grave. And now, I was too far in to climb out. As I closed the laptop for the last time, a wave of despair washed over me. The truth was out there, but it would never set me free. It had only chained me tighter, binding me to a world I could never escape. And so, this is where my story ends, not with a triumphant victory, but with the quiet resignation of someone who has lost everything. To those who might read this, take my words as a warning. Curiosity is a dangerous thing, and some doors are meant to stay closed. They're still out there, watching, waiting. And if you're not careful, they'll find you too. Thank you for listening. Stay safe. And remember, some mysteries are better left unsolved.